Jeremy, if I haven't got a chance to meet you, so glad you guys are here. I thought we'd just do something fun to start this morning. How many of you guys, you've got a phone? I'm sure all of you have a phone, and I know you've all turned the volume off because you all are ahead of the game in that. But here, let's just do something fun. Pull out your favorite social network real quick and just go ahead on it. I mean, just go tell people where you're at. Tell people you're at your favorite church in the world, Story Church, and that's at Story Church on Twitter or on Facebook or whatever. Go ahead. I'm telling you, I'm giving you permission right now. Put it out there. Let people know what's going on. We just want people to know. I mean, we just think this is too cool of a deal that's happening in order to just keep it a secret. And so we want to encourage you to use that all week long. Tell people what you're doing, what you're learning, all that kind of stuff. Encourage you in every way to do that. And if there's something cool that happens, during the day, or during a service, whatever, feel free. Throw that out there. We love it. So thank you guys for being here. Again, my name is Jeremy, and we have a huge day today. I mean, I am pumped. This is going to be just an exciting day for us because we've got life change that we're going to celebrate together through baptism. We've got food. I mean, come on, that is huge. We got a cookout out, in there, and then afterwards we're going to just, in all loving goodness, just kick the snot out of each other in kickball or dodgeball and all that kind of stuff, and we're gonna have some good old fun together. So thank you guys for being here. We start a brand new series today as well. And if you've never been with us, or maybe you're kind of new, we teach through series. We kind of focus on one idea for a little while, and we spend a few weeks doing that. And this time we're calling it Iceberg. And the subtitle is There's More Beneath the Surface. And we're talking this morning, you guys all get the analogy that it's an iceberg that you kind of see a little bit, but there's so much more going on beneath the surface that you and I don't know about. I've kind of had my mind thinking about icebergs, so this week I noticed there was a story that came out on CNN, and they were showing that in Iceberg, 2 times the size of Atlanta, just like chunked off of Antarctica and started cruising out into the ocean, right? Like twice the size of a major city is this block of ice that's floating out into the ocean. And they're actually concerned about it getting into like shipping lanes and stuff because it'll be there for like 2 years before it finally melts once it kind of gets out into the ocean. It's so massive. And these things, we all know, of course, Titanic and all these things of icebergs are dangerous. You see a little bit, but the danger is what's underneath. It's the unknown. It's what you can't see that often sinks the ship, right? And so this morning and throughout these next few weeks, we're going to jump into this subject because I just believe that as a culture and as people, we have a lot going on just below the surface. And there's a whole lot happening that we aren't dealing with or that people aren't aware of. And those things have the potential to sink us. They have the potential to absolutely, just ruin our lives, ruin the direction that we want to go, ruin our plans or our dreams. And we want to talk through those things and begin to wrestle through them together. Now, you've all seen a picture of an iceberg. We've got this kind of cool image, but this is like a real one, I guess. And it seems to me like a motivational, some sort of poster, right? Like you would see, I don't know, determination somehow across there or something, right? And it's. I mean, if you just saw the top, you'd be like, wow, look at that cool thing. But there is this massive structure underneath. And it's way bigger than what you can see on top, but it's obviously supporting all that. All of it is sort of coming from that. And the same is true in our lives when I just feel like we have interactions with people all day long, and they are experiencing parts of us that go way deep inside of us, and they go way deep in our past, and people are interacting with what they see. I'll give you an example. A couple weeks ago, my wife and I were on a date. We were over at Q Shack. Come on, best place in Durham. I love it. And we were there, and we were eating, and it was great. And there wasn't very many people there. There was a couple sitting kind of down on one end of this table, and we were sort of in the corner. And then there was this guy, a couple people in line, but this guy had ordered some food, but he was on his phone, and he was kind of waiting for his food and doing stuff. I didn't think anything of it. It was very normal. The guy was, in my mind, was not out of the ordinary. He wasn't loud. He wasn't obnoxious. He was no louder than any conversation in the room. But there came this moment where this lady at the end of the table just went off. Like she just started kind of getting really mad at this guy on the cell phone. And not just mad to the person with her, mad to the whole restaurant. Like, she was like, I can't believe you're making us listen to your whole conversation. And I mean, she was 10 times louder than this guy ever was, like on his phone. And it was very ironic that she is losing her mind over this guy and how distracting he was and how rude he was. And everyone in the restaurant is like, this is crazy, right? Like, we're all kind of looking around and everyone's like, don't make eye contact, she'll scream at you too, you know. Like, we were afraid. This woman had sort of lost her mind in this moment. But what was obvious is, I mean, you didn't have to be a rocket scientist to sit there in the room and go, this lady was probably mad before she ever got here, right? Like, her getting mad at guy on the cell phone probably has a whole lot to do with something else than it does guy on cell phone. And that's one of those things where we have these interactions with people throughout the day, and maybe it's you that suddenly you respond to someone, and your response to them even surprises you, and you go, whoa, I came on a little strong there, right? Or I responded in a way I didn't expect there. Or you have a conversation with someone and they come at you, their response seems really aggressive and out of place, and you're like, whoa. Like, I just thought we were talking about where we were having lunch, you know? And they just kind of come at you, and it doesn't seem, you're like, what is going on? Well, that's the iceberg, right? You're interacting with a tip. You're interacting with just this piece on the front that you can see, but there's so much more going on. And I remember times when I've had those reactions, when I've responded to my wife, I've snapped at her, I've snapped at my kids, or I've done something, I've been like, man, where's that, like, I was mad about something else, and I just brought it into the room. I created another situation where there didn't have to be one. And so we've all done this. We've all seen it. We've all experienced it. And here's the important thing this morning. It's possible for you and I to be following Jesus above the surface. And above the surface of the water, everything looks good and everything's great. But beneath the surface, the stuff that we can't see, is all kinds of pain and all kinds of dysfunction and all kinds of problems. And I just believe this morning and throughout this series that God wants to deal with us beneath the surface. I think God is more concerned with what's going on inside of us than he is about what we sort of show on the outside. I think that if we can deal with our heart issues and we can deal with the stuff beneath the surface, then the stuff that's visible starts to take care of itself. And so this series over the next several weeks, we're just going to get beneath the surface together, and we're going to figure out, what's going on there. How do we deal with it? How do we become healthy people in kind of the whole sense of who we are, and not just that little bit that people can see. And so I'm going to ask you to do some things during this series that might be uncomfortable for you. I'm going to ask you to go places with your spouse or with your friends that might be hard for you. I'm going to ask you to get to a level of honesty that might be really difficult. But here's what I just believe that if we will deal with that stuff, that we can be healthy and whole and experience the kind of life that God wants for us in ways that we've never experienced before. In fact, Jesus said it one time this way. He said that that the truth sets us free. And then if we will get to sort of the true stuff of who we are and deal with that, then we experience freedom. And too many of us are living this sort of slavery, bondage type reality because we've got this junk that's beneath the surface that we're not dealing with. And I believe God wants to set us free from that. I'm a big Narnia fan. How many of you guys like those kinds of movies and books? And okay, so we've been reading the books together in my house with my oldest. And in Voyage of the Dawn Treader, there is this great scene where there's this little obnoxious kid named Eustace. And he is just a pain, and he is grumpy, and he is prideful, and he's just mean, and he thinks he knows everything, and nobody likes to be around him. All the people are complaining about him all the time, and he's he ends up in Narnia, and he's making everybody miserable. And what ends up happening is that kind of through some weird things, and of course this is a fantasy book, don't need to tell you that, but he ends up becoming a dragon. Okay, he sort of becomes outwardly what he was inwardly. He sort of has this like hard scales, and he's breathing fire, and he's just like ugly and grotesque, and it's like he became the thing that his heart sort of was. And then there's this scene later where he wants to break free from that. He realizes he kind of has this, he understands what he was doing, and so he starts to peel off layers, but every time he does, there's more layers, and he can't get through it until finally the character of Aslan, which represents Christ in these books, finally takes his claws and like runs them deep through Eustace to sort of break free from this, and he finally is able to peel it all off. And it's painful. And that's the picture that I want you to have this morning, because what we're going to talk about over these next few weeks, it's potentially painful to start to deal with this stuff and start to unravel some of the stuff that wraps around our heart. But if we will do that, then we will experience freedom like we've never had before. There's a book I've been reading, and sort of in preparation for this, called Emotionally Healthy Church. And there's another, same author wrote Emotionally Healthy Christian or Emotionally Healthy Spirituality, all these different things. And one of the things he says, I love this quote from his book. It says, "If I'm willing to go deep beneath the iceberg of my present self, I have to be willing to suffer the discomfort and pain that's part of pioneering new parts of myself, the good, the bad, and the ugly." And I just think that's what we're in for. Over these next few weeks, if we're like, okay, God, I want you to show up in my life in big ways. I want you to change me. I want you to use me to reach people for Christ. I want you to use me to change the world or to do something great. I think God is going to have to sort of, change our hearts and deal with that iceberg stuff beneath the surface before we can be used to the fullest extent of what he wants for us. So 2 questions that we're going to ask this morning, 2 questions that I want you to wrestle through, and you might write these down. These are things that throughout the week I hope you'll think about. But there are 2 things that we need to do. The first is that we've got to develop an awareness of what we're feeling and doing. So we've got to ask the question, what am I feeling? Like what? Like the what question. What is the emotion? What is the thing beneath the surface? What are the things that I'm dealing with on a regular basis? Where are those, what are they? And then the second thing deals with the motivation. It's kind of like, where does it come from? So it's more of the why question. Why am I feeling it? Okay, so what am I feeling? And why am I feeling it? What is the thing that anger just came out. So that's the what. Why? Like, where is that coming from? What is the anger associated with, right? So lady who is mad in Cushak isn't angry about cell phone guy. She's probably angry about work, or she's angry about her husband, or she's angry about something else. But cell phone guy took the wrath, right? And poor cell phone guy is like, at one point he was like, are you okay? He was like, it's like he was reflecting to her, like, you've kind of lost your mind here, right? And so you've had those interactions. And so what is it that you're dealing with? What is the thing? What's beneath the surface? If we were looking at that picture again, what is all that's underneath the part you can see? And then where did it come from? Why are you feeling it? What is that all about? And so here's what I want to do. I want to show you a little bit about Jesus, because I think Jesus was a master at dealing with this kind of stuff. Now, Jesus, you need to understand, while he was fully God, he was fully man as well. And so Jesus experienced and expressed all the human emotions that you and I experience. He was angry, he was sad, he had grief, he had frustration, he had joy, he had all the different emotions that you and I deal with on a regular basis. And yet, the Bible tells us that Jesus was sinless. So the emotions themselves, even anger, even frustration, they're not evil. They're not things that we should go, I can't express anger. And so we just stuff it. We pretend it's not there. It ends up adding to what's beneath the surface, right? Until it explodes one day. But Jesus regularly expressed these emotions. These weren't bad things. Jesus knew that this is part of being human, and he was able to express them. Notice how aware of himself Jesus is. Look at John 13. It says, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. It's this sense of Jesus, like he wasn't surprised by what's going on. He knew that he had the authority. He knew where he came from. He knew where he was going. And nothing was going to deter him. And you and I get sidetracked when there are competing plans for your life, right? How many of you have, don't raise your hand. How many of you have a friend or a relative or someone who has a plan for your life, right? You do. Somebody around in your life who's like, they have a dream for you, or they have a thing that they think you should be doing, right? It might be your boss, it might be a spouse, it might be a neighbor, it might be a parent, anybody who's sort of, they've got their plan for your life. Well, Jesus had that too. I mean, Jesus' own family at different times tried to say, Jesus, stop saying those things. Don't do that. His disciples regularly pulled him aside and said, Jesus, don't you understand? You can't do that. And all these different people had a plan for Jesus' life. The crowds had a plan for Jesus' life. The religious leaders had a plan for Jesus' life. Jesus' own family and his friends and his disciples had a plan for his life. But because Jesus knew who he was, where he was from, and where he was going, Jesus wasn't distracted. He wasn't easily manipulated and pushed because Jesus was completely secure with who he was. And part of us, that stuff beneath the surface, is that emotional unhealth is when we aren't sure of who we are. We're not comfortable in our own skin sometimes. And so we end up sort of getting, pushed this way or pushed that way, or we end up sort of with these weird reactions. And Jesus was completely okay with where he was and was able to break free as a result from the expectations of other people on him. And so for you and I, we have to have a deep awareness of what we're feeling. Where, what is it? Where is it coming from? And this is tough. This is one of those things for you and I, it's tough to get to. But emotions and expressing those emotions isn't the problem. It's understanding, okay, what is it? Where is it coming from? And how do I deal with it? So here's the thing. I want to just talk about those two questions this morning. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling it? And the first thing for you and me is how do we get to understand what we're feeling? How do we get to understand what is going on? Like, what is the iceberg? Like, how do we even start to become aware of that? Because the truth is, many of us we're self-conscious, but we're not very self-aware sometimes. We're worried about how we're perceived, but we're not very aware about how we actually are perceived, right? We have an idea, we think what we're projecting is out there, but what other people are experiencing is often very different. And so let's talk about how do we get to this question, what am I feeling? What am I experiencing right now? Here's the thing, your body tells you often what you're experiencing. And God has made it this way to where, our emotions and our physical bodies are sort of tied in together. And so here's the deal. When's the last time picture, you had a knot in your stomach, right? You had that feeling. You had a tension headache, right? You had you biting your nails, right? You biting your lip or your cheek, or like a lot of times people chew on things or they bite things or whatever when they have something going on that's consuming their mind. What about foot tapping? Like you're doing that thing in the meeting, or you're doing something with your pencil, or you're kind of in that place. Your physical body is doing things. Some of you have a hard time sleeping because of something going on in your life. Sometimes you find yourself like you don't even mean to, but your fists are clenched. And you're like, whoa, okay, I need to relax a little bit, right? Or you got that sweaty palm thing going. Or sometimes you have an interaction with someone and you feel in the interaction, you feel the blood draining from your face, right? That you get that flustered feeling and you're like, what is happening? My body is signaling right now that something in this conversation, something in this meeting, something in this environment that I'm in isn't right. Something feels wrong. And so there's something going on there, and our bodies are trying to tell us what is happening. And so we have to listen to it. And the problem is we don't often sit long enough and quiet enough to actually even know what we're feeling. For a lot of people, you ask them, hey, what's going on, or what are you feeling right now? And people sometimes have a hard time even putting into words the emotions that they're experiencing or that they're expressing. And it's probably just because of that. Like, we don't want to sit quiet enough and long enough to understand those kinds of things. So what is going on? What is your body telling you? What notice, like when you're in the meeting, when you think about that person, when you have that kind of situation happen, what happens to your physical body? Do you get sick? Do you stop? Some of you feel like I'm going to throw up if I think about that situation right now. What is that? Like, what is that? What's going on there? Right? Those are things that you and I have to identify. And then we've got to get beyond that, because it's great to know, okay, that situation makes me uncomfortable. That person I feel anger toward. That, it's one thing to identify it, but it's another thing to go, okay, now why? Like, what is that about? Where is that coming from? How do I start to deal with that? And this is one of the things that as you read the Bible and as you look through the New Testament, Jesus is constantly taking people from above the surface conversations to below the surface conversations. He's constantly doing this. He's taking people and he's trying to get to motivations and he's trying to get to heart issues and he's trying to unravel for people sort of like what's behind that? Where is that coming from? In fact, there's this great story we're going to read in a second from John. And John writes about this woman who Jesus was stopping in this town. It was a town of people that really, as Jews, they would not interact with. They wouldn't have spoken to. They would have usually traveled around this city instead of going through. But Jesus goes right into the city and sits at the well. Now, not only is that going on, but then there's this woman that comes. And as a good Jewish man, he should not have interacted with this woman the way that he does. But he speaks to her, a Samaritan woman, a woman of another ethnicity that he should not, culturally have been talking to. And yet here he is in the situation, and he has these interactions with this woman that are fascinating because she clearly has some issues that we're going to see in a second. She's got some stuff going on, right? And Jesus wants to get at those issues, but she's constantly pushing the conversation back above the surface. And Jesus keeps trying to take it beneath the surface, and she keeps pushing it back above the surface. And she's got this stuff that she wants, but Jesus wants something different. So let's catch up. It's sort of halfway through the story. Jesus has just told her about this water, this living water. He had asked her for a drink, and she said, how could you be asking me? You're not supposed to talk to me, and all this kind of stuff. And then Jesus replies, anyone who drinks this water will soon become thirsty again. He's talking about the well. But those who drink the water I give will never be thirsty again. It becomes a fresh, bubbling spring within them, giving them eternal life. So Jesus is talking about something else, right? He's talking about life that he wants to give, that it comes from within and it bubbles up and it never runs dry and people will never be thirsty again as a result of it. And so she says, please, sir, give me this water. Then I'll never be thirsty again and I won't have to come here to get water. Now stop right there for a second. Jesus, in this moment, hears something from this woman that goes far beyond thirst, right? There is this above the water, thirsty conversation about water. But then she drops this line, but if I had that, I would never have to come here again. Now, Jesus picks up on this, and this is what happens when you are an emotionally healthy person. You notice unhealth in somebody else. And so Jesus hears this comment from this woman. And he picks up on it. He tunes into this. And it's like, this woman doesn't want to come here. What's going on? And as you'll see in a second, she's got issues. But part of the issues are that when she has to come to the well, she has to interact with other people. And she doesn't like that. Because this woman has a past. This woman has things that she's not proud of and things that she's continuing to do that she's not proud of. And so she's there in the middle of the day when all the other women would normally come early in the morning when it wasn't hot. And here she is in the middle of the day. And why is she there? Because she doesn't want to have to interact with other people. See, she's got this thing and she's thinking, I'll just avoid them. I'll just avoid that conflict. I'll just stay away from those people. Then I don't have to deal with it. And see, that's below the surface. That's iceberg stuff. I don't want to have to deal with it, so I'm just going to pretend it's not there. I'm going to ignore it. I'm going to find a way around it. And this is what she's doing. And if I had this water, then I don't have to come at all. I don't have to worry about accidentally bumping into somebody else. I don't have to worry about the conflict that's there. I could pretend it doesn't exist, and I could hide out in my house and never leave. And this is what's wrapped up in this statement for her. Tell me about this water. Give me some of this water so I don't have to come here anymore. And then Jesus goes, okay, you want to go? Let's go beneath the surface. And here's what Jesus says. Go and get your husband. Jesus told her, I don't have a husband, the woman replied. And Jesus, I love it. You're right. You don't have a husband, right? Like Jesus knows way more than he had led on to. And he says, you don't have a husband, for you've had 5 husbands, and you aren't even married to the man you're living with now. You certainly spoke the truth, right? Like, so he's like, yep, it's true. You don't have a husband. You kind of left out the part that you've been married 5 times and now you're on your 6th man. And there's something going on here, right? So Jesus is trying to identify with this woman. He's trying to go, what's going on here? Like, what is your deal? Like, why are you running from man to man and relationship to try and satisfy something that's clearly not working? Like, what is the thing that you're dealing with? And so Jesus is trying to get beneath the surface with her. He's trying to address the iceberg. He's trying to go to that thing, and he's trying to sort of say, okay, let's talk about that. Let's go deeper. Let's go beneath the surface. Let's figure out what it is that is going on here. And the woman, I love this, her response, "Sir," in verse 19, "you must be a prophet." Yep, that could probably be the case. "So tell me, why is it that you Jews insist that Jerusalem's the only place of worship, while we Samaritans claim it's here on Mount Gerizim where our ancestors worship?" Now, does that seem like a totally oddball question right then in that moment? Yes, because it is, right? She goes from, we're beneath the surface, we're talking about the issue at hand, to, hey, by the way, where do you go to church? Right? Like, just out of it's like, do you go to that church over there? Or do you go to that? Where are we supposed to worship, Jesus? She goes from beneath the surface to, whoa, that got personal. Let's stay up here. Let's stay in the safe zone of conversations about theology and where we're supposed to worship and this kind of stuff. Because this down here, Jesus, that got too close to my heart. I'd like to keep it up here at my head. I'd like to stay right up here where my head's above the water, and I can talk about theology and keep everything in my brain, and I can talk about, what's real and what's true and all that good stuff, but I don't have to deal with this part underneath the water. This is my heart. Jesus, I don't want to go there. And so he's like, no, she's just like, let's take it back. Let's take it back up, Jesus. And I love it because Jesus, we're not going to read the whole story, but I just wanted you to understand, Jesus keeps pushing her. And he keeps going deeper, and he keeps pushing, and he's like, no, let's deal with this. Let's deal with this. Rather than avoiding and not being able to come to the water and having this sort of, compartmentalized life where you're afraid to interact with people, what if we just healed that and fixed that so that you could live a normal kind of life? And by the end, the woman, there's this picture of her, it says that she leaves her water jar and goes running into the city and tells everyone all the stuff that she has done in her life. And she's like, you wouldn't believe this guy out at the well. He told me about my first husband, Larry, and my second husband, Joe, and she just starts telling them all. And she goes from, I don't want to talk about it, I don't want to deal with my heart, to just laying it out there in the middle of the city for everyone to hear because she has been transformed. There's this moment where she's like, I don't need the water. I got the living water. I got Jesus. And now I can run into the city and I don't have to be ashamed or afraid of things. I can open up my heart. I can be made whole. I can deal with the whole of who I am. And this is what she does with this interaction with Jesus. But it's not the only time Jesus does this. He does this several times. There's another time these Pharisees, these religious leaders come to Jesus with a question because they notice that Jesus' disciples aren't washing their hands the way that they're supposed to, like the ceremonial thing that they do before they eat. And it was a rule that they had made up and all this kind of stuff, and they're not doing it. And they're complaining, Jesus, why aren't your guys washing their hands and following the rules? And Jesus responds to this in Mark 7, verse 14. He says, again, Jesus called the crowd to him and said, listen to me, everyone, and understand this. Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it's what comes out of a person that defiles them. He says, listen, your hands don't make you dirty. Your heart makes you dirty. Right? It's not what's out here that needs to be cleaned. It's what's in here that needs to be cleaned. And he's telling the people, he's like, don't get confused. Don't think that because you follow certain rules or because you washed your hands a certain way or because you went through some ritual that somehow you're clean. What needs to happen is your heart. I've told you guys I coach baseball, and I was over at Southern, or we were on a game this week and sitting in the dugout, and it happened to be that day that the storm went crazy. And so we're sitting in the dugout, there's lightning, kids with bats and lightning, not a good thing. So we're sitting there, we're waiting it out, and eventually we end up in the gym, but we're hanging out, and they're like, it's just funny the conversations that when the game's not happening, suddenly things happen. And so next thing I know, there's this conversation about why you need to go to church and theology and some of these kinds of things that these kids are talking about. And I'm not involved. I generally don't talk. I don't want to be in that conversation because I want to build relationships and not be pastor there. I want to be coach, So they're talking, and of course they always, coach, come on, what do you, reverend, they'll call me sometimes. They'll say funny things like that. And but there's this conversation happening, and this one coach is talking about to this kid about how foul his mouth is, and the kid's like, it's okay, I go to church every Sunday kind of thing. And so then the coach and the kid are sort of like having this conversation about what makes you okay with God. Is it because you go to church and you sing the song, or is it, something else? And they're asking me to weigh in all this. But this is the issue that they're dealing with here. Is it the ritual that I go through? Is it because I showed up here at 10 o'clock on Sunday morning? Is it because I put money in a box? Is it because I sang really good? Or is it because I served and I volunteered this morning? Or is there a deeper thing that Jesus is after? Is there something else that's going on? And so when you and I begin to identify the what that's beneath the surface, that's awesome, but let's get the next step. Let's allow Jesus to begin to poke and prod at what's underneath. Let's allow Jesus to begin to ask the questions in our hearts and say, hey, what is this part about? Why do you react that way? Why does that bother you? Why is that person in your life sort of outside the realm of your forgiveness? What is going on over here? And so, you might just sit and you might just ask yourself a few questions sometime. I mean, think about things like what are some of the behaviors that you have in life? What are some of the things that you do that maybe have a deeper thing behind them? So, I mean, let's just go through these. I came up with a few that I was thinking of. So why does a comment that someone made continue to play through your head? Why does that bother you so much? What is that about? Where's that coming from? What about, why are you avoiding that person? I don't have to say, the second I say it, you're like, oh, that person, right? Who's the one that you don't answer their call? You know where they are at lunch, and so you go around, right? Why are you avoiding that person? What about the meeting that's coming up next week that even as I say that, you got tense? You feel it, your body. The hairs start to stand up. You get a little sweaty. The head starts to pound a little bit, right? What is that about? Where is that coming from? How about this? Why am I always late? That, you're like, wait, where's that one from? No, seriously. What's going on in us that causes us to fail to be able to discipline ourselves enough to get somewhere on time? What does that say? What is going on? How about this? Why do I want to succeed so badly? There's nothing wrong with success, nothing wrong with doing great in your job and all this kind of stuff, but what's the motivation behind that? Is there someone you're trying to prove yourself to? Is there something else that you're trying to compensate for or overcome as a result? Success in itself isn't bad. Having a goal to be successful isn't bad. But is it coming from a bad place? Is it coming from something else? How about this? Why do I completely avoid every kind of confrontation? Why? I will just say, no, okay, fine, we'll do what you want to do, rather than have an argument, rather than have a conversation about an issue. How about this? Why do I feel compelled to answer every phone call and email immediately? What does that say? What is there, do I have this thing that I feel like I have to please people, or I'm going to let them down? I have this fear that somehow they'll think something of me. Where is that coming from? See, those are all things, and none of them by themselves is necessarily a bad thing. But let's talk about, okay, so that's the surface thing. Oh, I'm just really prompt. I just really care about responding to people so they know they've heard from me. Okay, that may be true. But is that it? Or is there something else? Is there something else going on there that's okay, we see it on the outside as something positive, but maybe there's something else deeper that's going on here that I need to sort of think through. And guys, this takes courage. It takes courage to ask, what am I really feeling and why am I feeling this? So important for you and I to do. Now, here's the good news today, guys. Jesus didn't come to make you behave. He came to make you whole. He didn't come to make you behave. He came to make you whole. And this is why the debates over where should we, whatever, and how should we, Jesus doesn't get into those debates. He goes below the surface. He's constantly going, okay, let's talk about the heart. Let's talk about anger. Let's talk about unforgiveness. Let's talk about jealousy. Let's talk about where those things are coming from. And so Jesus pushes deeper. Here's the deal, guys. This morning, we have an opportunity. We're going to celebrate today life change. We're going to, through baptism, we're going to invite people to demonstrate publicly what God has been doing, not above the surface, but below the surface. What God has been doing in their hearts. And some of you in this room, you've been baptized, and there was a moment for you when you recognized publicly, God has been doing something in my heart, in my life. Like where everyone else can't necessarily see it, and maybe it starts to show. Maybe people are starting to go, wow, why are you so happy all the time? Or what's going on there? That's the above the surface, but the change is happening beneath the surface. And God is doing things, and He's transforming people, and He's speaking into your life, and He's giving you hope, and you can't explain it, you don't know where it's coming from, but or suddenly you have this, you care about that person that you used to hate, or suddenly, these different things are changing internally. And so this morning as we do baptisms, we're going to celebrate. These are people who publicly, who outwardly are showing us the tip of the iceberg. But inwardly, there has been something going on. Underneath the surface, Jesus has been transforming their hearts and their lives. And that's what baptism is. It's a public statement about what has already taken place in our hearts. There's nothing in this water that's special. There's nothing in this event that's special other than to say it is a public statement that says, here's what Jesus has done in my life, and I cannot wait to share. I want to show people. And it's interesting to me, isn't it, that we take people beneath the surface first, and then we bring them back up. And this is what God does. It's a symbol of us being put to death with Christ, put into the grave with Him, where all of our brokenness and our sin and our shame and the ugly stuff that's inside of us, all of the beneath the surface stuff went to death with Him, and then we're raised up and we get out, and we're fully out, and because all of us has been transformed by Him, and we're raised to new life. And so this is a picture of what has taken place in hearts and lives all around this room. And it's so exciting for us as a church when we celebrate this. And I just want you to hear, I want you to know this morning that if you don't know Christ, listen to this verse in 2 Corinthians 5. It says, for God made Christ, who never sinned, to be the offering for our sin, so that we could be made right with God through Christ. See, Jesus didn't do anything wrong, we did. But Jesus became the offering. He became the one who took the blame for us so that we could experience life. And this picture this morning of baptism, this thing, you don't need a class, you don't need a certification. All you need is your heart having been transformed by Jesus. Jesus has come into your life, He's changed you, and this, you show the rest of us. I want to celebrate. This is what Jesus has done in my life. And as far as I know this morning, we've got at least one that's going to be baptized. And I'm here praying. There is no reason today that if you've never been baptized that you can't get in this water today. Like right now, I know you weren't planning on it, but why not? And so we've got people here this morning. We've prepared because we've been praying for this. We've been asking God for this. There are potentially people in this room who you didn't plan on it. You walked in the room and you never thought, today I will be in my clothes underwater. Like you didn't think that. But it's going to happen for some of you, I think, because there has been a transformation in your life and you want to tell people. You want to show outwardly what God has already done inwardly. And so we've got a team of people who have prepared, and we've got stuff for you. We've tried to remove every excuse you could come up with this morning. If you're like, no, I would, but these are my best jeans, or whatever. Like, cool. We got bags. We got clothes. We got shorts and shirts for everybody who needs it. We got everything. We got stuff to fix your hair and do it back up when you're done. We got towels. We got everything you could possibly need this morning. And so all that's in the way is you saying, gosh, I guess I better do this. And so I just want to encourage you this morning that if you want to put your faith in Jesus and you just want to take that next step of obedience, if you've already trusted Him, this is it. And if you choose to trust Him and follow Him today, right now, then 2 minutes from now, you can be in the water. There's no reason to wait. And I just want to invite you. I want to celebrate with you, and the band's going to come, and they're going to lead us, and we're going to talk through this. But guys, this below the surface kind of stuff, I mean, this is where the life transformation happens. And when Jesus comes into our lives, he changes us enormously, and he goes into the deep places, and he takes the stuff that we don't want to drag out into the open. And sometimes he does not because he wants to hurt us, but because he wants to make us whole. And I'm telling you, in the same way that a doctor, sometimes you'll subject yourself to the doctor's scalpel, right? Not because it's like, hey, this sounds like a fun idea. No, it's painful. Recovery stinks, like all that stuff. But the doctor's going to go in and he's going to make you whole. He's going to heal you. He's going to do something to help you. And if you found cancer, if you found something in you that didn't belong, you'd want to get it out. And I'm telling you today, Jesus wants to come into your life and he wants to transform you. And there's something in your life, maybe even as a follower of Jesus, you've been following him for years, and there's still something in your heart that you haven't let go of. There's something in your life that you've refused to let him transform. And maybe today you let him. Maybe today you start going, okay, Jesus, I've been like the woman at the well, and I want to stay up here with my head above water, and I want to talk about that stuff. But Jesus, I'm ready to go deeper. I'm ready to let you deal with the stuff below the surface. And so today, maybe it's just for you. It's a time to pray and to say, God, I invite you back into my life. I invite you to go deep, to change the things in my heart that I didn't want to change. And today can be the fresh start. It can be the way forward. So here's the deal. We're going to sing. And I'm going to pray for you first, and we're going to sing. But if you would like to be baptized today, even if you weren't planning on it, I'm going to invite you to go right to the back of the room. Seth's back there. He's got his hand raised. You can go straight to Seth. They will lead you. They will get you everything that you need this morning. And you can join us, and we can celebrate with you. We can hear your story. We can celebrate with you the work that God has been doing in your heart. So I'm just going to ask you, be courageous. Be bold today. We're your friends. We're your family. We want to hug you and encourage you and high-five you and shout for joy with you. But this is your moment. Let me pray for you. God, we love you. We're so thankful, God, for all that you've done in our lives. We thank you that you care enough about us, not just to address what's outward, not just to modify our behavior, but to get deep into our hearts and to deal with the source and to deal with the junk that's beneath the surface. God, we want to be whole, complete, healthy people. And so we invite you into our lives. We invite you into our hearts to change us. Even those of us who have followed you for decades maybe, we still need to be changed, God. There's still things in us that need to be dealt with. And so we invite you in today. God, I pray for people in this room who are on the edge, who are should I, shouldn't I? And God, I just pray for boldness and courage. And God, would you just invite them this morning into life and push them, God, into the waters. God, push them into this next step of obedience so that they will follow you and declare you as their Lord. And we can celebrate together this morning. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.